The new big problem in America is, of course, white people are always calling the cops on black people. White people are always messing with black people. And that is why black people commit so much crime. That is why black criminality and violence is so wildly out of proportion. The latest example of this white racism so wildly out of proportion happened. There were two mass shootings in one night. One in Philly, one in Washington. This happened just the other night. Why don't we take a look at those so we can have a little reminder of what the problem is. Then, at the end, because you guys are always screaming for it, I'm going to give you a solution from the Washington Post.
Breaking news here. Action News has learned one of the children wounded in a wild shootout in North Philadelphia has died. 5 people in all were injured, including 4 children. Action News reporter Jeanette Reyes is live at St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, the scene of such anguish for so many families. Jeanette.
That's right, Matt. Just a couple of hours ago, we could hear the family members and friends just sobbing and crying. We are at a distance, but it was loud enough that we could hear them as they got the news. As you mentioned, 5 people shot, 4 of them between the ages of 11 and 14, and police saying the gunman, one of them could be as young as 15 years old. Take a look at the video here from overnight of the scene. Police responded just before midnight along the 2100 block of North 4th Street for reports of 2 people shot. As soon as they arrived on scene, they found 4 victims. A 14-year-old with a gunshot wound to the head. He was taken to Hahnemann Hospital, or rather St. Christopher's, in critical condition. He later died. Now, another 14-year-old and a 15-year-old were both shot in the legs, and a 24-year-old was also shot in the leg. Now, the boys were taken to St. Christopher's, the man to Temple. All are in stable condition. Police later learned that an 11-year-old was shot in the leg, and he was taken to Hahnemann. He is also in stable condition this morning. Now, back at the scene, the road was just littered with shell casings, as many as 20 of them. Nearby cars were also sprayed with bullets. Take a listen.
We're not certain which of the 5 victims at this time were the target. We believe all 5 victims were outside on the sidewalk in the 2100 block of 4th Street. But which, if any of them, were intended targets, or which, if any, were struck by stray gunfire, unknown at this time.
Now, in the overnight hours, we understand that police were actually in contact with one of the gunman's parents, the one who's possibly just 15 years old. We understand that they also might have some surveillance camera footage that could give them some much needed leads in this case. But at this point, they believe 2 gunmen are on the run. An investigation is underway, and a 14-year-old boy is now dead after being shot in the leg. Police don't know at this point whether he or any of the boys were the intended targets.
We begin with breaking news. A 10-year-old girl is dead following the shooting of 4 people in Northeast D.C. tonight. Police are now looking for a group of masked men who opened fire near a park in the 300 block of 53rd Street around 8 p.m. Fox 5's Evan Lambert is live on the scene tonight with the breaking details. Evan?
Sean, you can see that there is a major police presence still here at the scene as investigators try to find out who was responsible for this shooting. It happened just down this street here, and it claimed the life, as you mentioned, of a 10-year-old girl. Police say about 15 to 20 people were standing outside right around 8 tonight. That's when a black Infiniti SUV pulled up, and 4 men got out of the SUV and started firing randomly into the crowd. 4 people were hit, including that 10-year-old girl who neighbors say just recently had a birthday. The other 3 people hit are adults and survived, according to police. Tonight we heard from Assistant Chief Chanel Dickerson and Mayor Bowser on this heartless violence that took that young girl's life.
They came out in this community without regard to human life and opened fire. And we have to stand up as a community to say no more. A 10-year-old girl lost her life here today. All the hopes and dreams that her family had for her is gone. And we have to be outraged. We have to work with the police. You have to work with us to remove illegal firearms from our city.
The department has been working with this community hand in hand throughout the summer months. We know that members of the community will continue to work with the police department to let us know anything they know about what happened here tonight.
Of course, the New York Times says that 75% of mass shooters are black. The trolls just cannot get their minds around that. They're constantly saying that's not true. So we constantly have to come in and go, yeah, we had another mass shooting the other night involving a bunch of black people. Some people died, some people got shot. Yeah, you got anything? Yeah, Colin, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And besides, Colin, you never have solutions. Oh, I've got a solution for you. It's right here. It's from Washington, D.C. We just saw a story from Washington, D.C., right? So when we see a story, somebody from the Washington Post or a story in the Post, we're kind of inclined to think, well, this is a big, international story with really big international players contributing to the Post. But really, the Post exists on two levels. It exists on that level, but it exists on another level just as a hometown newspaper where black criminality and violence in Washington is just as bad as anywhere in America, and largely because the people who run Washington are convinced that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. You think I'm making this up? Why don't we listen to the editor, one of the editors of the Washington Post? She was talking to I was going to use an obscenity, a person used to have a radio show in Philadelphia named Michael Smerconish. She offered up her solution.
Hey, Karen, we came at this from slightly different angles, but humor me for a moment on my issue. What do you think about Starbucks closing only the U.S. locations?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up. Starbucks is an international brand, and one thing that is also international is anti-blackness and is racial bias. So it'd be very interesting to figure out, does this happen in its locations in Europe, in airports? But for me, again, I agree with you in the sense that whether or not this is a PR move, look, an afternoon of racial bias training, and we don't even know exactly what is going to be entailed in that training, is not going to solve the issue. What I argued in my piece for the Washington Post was that this is an American problem. So when you have white folks, non-black people of color that are so quick to call the police on black people in a particular space, knowing what we know about what can happen to black people after encounters with police, whether it be arrests, detentions, or injury, or even death, I think is what we really need to be talking about. So who's going to train not only, the Starbucks employees, but who's going to train teachers, refraining from calling the police on black kids in schools? Who's going to train the mom and pop stores, real estate developers, landlords? I mean, really and honestly, I think America needs about 100 years worth of racial bias training.
So how'd you like that? 100 years of bias training for white people. Is that going to be enough? I forget when it was, but it was, it was good 15, 20 years ago. They were doing an affirmative action case at the Supreme Court, and Sandra Day O'Connor, one of these conservatives that turned liberal on the court, she filed a dissent. She filed an opinion that said, listen, I don't like identity politics. I don't like affirmative action. I don't like making decisions one way or the other based on race. But we're going to need another 25 years of this before we can get rid of affirmative action. Dan, that means we're still, after we get rid of Sandra Day O'Connor's affirmative action, we're still going to have a good 50 years left for this bias training that all white people have to go through, because we're always messing with black people, always forcing them to do this crazy crap, always putting them in prison for no reason whatsoever. I had a guy this morning go, Colin, you want to put the links to your stories, because, if we put the links to your stories and we showed them to the trolls, that way they would believe you. Yeah, okay, good idea, you do it. And then come back and let us know how much of a difference that made. Jesse Lee Peterson takes these stories out in the street and he says, what do you think of this black on white violence?